right. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the second in our series of sport volunteer webinars. My name is Gillian Manson and I'm part of the team here at Vicsport, where it's my pleasure to be developing and managing a specialist set of resources and programs about sport volunteers. As we start our time together, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the various lands on which we are all gathering today from across Victoria and pay my respects to elders past and present. I acknowledge the important contribution Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples make in creating a strong and vibrant Australian society. I would also like to extend my respect to any First Nations people joining us today. This webinar is a collaboration between the teams at Volunteering Victoria and Vicsport. Joining me today will be another Gillian Garner from Volunteering Victoria. Gillian brings her enormous expertise and experience to assist all of us in sport to enhance our volunteer programs. This webinar will be interactive and Gillian will be seeking your feedback at several points during the presentation. She'll be doing this through several Slido questions and polls, one of which will be coming up quite shortly in case you want to have your phones ready. Gillian will also be providing us with some special advice about online recruiting platforms that you may wish to be able to use and adapt into your club. We also recommend the chat as a great place to share information and ask questions. The chat will be closely monitored through the webinar and we'll do our best to get to your questions. This webinar is being recorded, so it remains a resource available to others at later date. And we also will be sending out these slides after the presentation to all participants, so you don't have to madly scramble to write down information as we go. Just a reminder, if you need to, if you can just give us your name on your Zoom handle so that we're aware of who you are. So with those over, we might just move to our first slide there, please, Jen. So to give you an idea of where we're going today, we're doing a big picture to start with about volunteering, and then we're going into our specialist section, which is about recruitment. And the recruitment goes in two phases. One is planning and one is the actual recruitment options that are available through to you. If we can just move to the next slide, this will be our first Slido poll. So I'm handing over to you, Gillian Garner, to talk us through that.
Hi, everyone. I am the Membership and Policy Officer at Volunteering Victoria. There are a couple of us here on the webinar. So if you've got specific questions or you need help on anything, just pop it into the chat and we can either come back to you later or we can try and answer some of the questions now. Okay, so the Slido is on, and it's really because at the moment we've got a very wide range of organizations who are attending today. We want to try and get a check to see who's from where and just get a little bit of an idea. So we can already see that people are popping in where they're from, which is great. So we're just going to give you a minute or so just to pop in. Because while the resources are probably most valuable for sports clubs at that level, what we're hoping is from local governments or volunteer support services, and then the peak bodies, that those resources are made available and make sure that your sports clubs are aware of them. So yes, this gives us a little bit of an idea as to where we are, which is really good. In terms of the other, if you want to pop into the chat where you're from, that's great, because it'll just give us an indication of what that other covers. But it's actually good because we've got quite a mixture. I mean, and it's a good balance. Thanks, Kelly. the Gisborne Giants. Okay, I think that gives us a good idea. So Jen, let's pop on to the next one. But everybody, you can see where people are from. No, it's really good to see there are lots of clubs, which is excellent.
Thanks, everybody. So there's a big picture to what we're talking about today, and that is that sport and volunteering are completely interlinked. And volunteers, as we know, ensure the activities of every sport of any size and at all levels go ahead, and makes them safe, accessible and inclusive. We believe the number of people volunteering in sport in Victoria is enormous. At least 738,000 is what we think. We know it's a big number, but we believe at this point that overall our volunteer numbers post-COVID haven't recovered, and there are people who are not coming back, but sport is still there in all its glory going ahead. So the other thing we know is volunteer numbers really matter at the coalface in a club. And so being in a sporting club typically means you're going to be under-resourced, you're going to be time poor and dependent on volunteers. So what our aim is to give you input, assistance and support to help you get a volunteer program that truly supports your club. So we're looking at solutions which work where you are. It's saying volunteering is a big topic. We break that down into accessible chunks. We're creating and have created club-specific resources and toolkit items on the Volunteering Victoria Sport Volunteer website, the links of which will come with this presentation when we send it out to you. We've linked with Volunteering Victoria because they're really good at this stuff, and it helps us in sport look outside our boundaries. The other thing is we want a sport industry grouping within Volunteering Victoria, which builds and grows over time. So planning pays off, and we've created what we call a sport volunteer action cycle. Volunteering is a big topic, but by breaking it into 6 smaller topics, we think this makes it all doable. And particularly at a club level, you do not have to do it all at once, but you might want to start somewhere and just get good at that and then move to the next piece and the next piece, or just define where you need some help. So if we can move to the next page, please, Jen. First of all, have any of you accessed our Sport Volunteer Project resources? I'll hand you over to Gillian and she'll talk you through that.
Yeah, so this slider is really just to check to see whether people do know that they're there. And this is our concern, right? Is that there'll be some who do not know that it's there. So when we send out the links, you will at least have that information and you'll be able to access them. But it is really good. And if anybody wants to pop into the chat how they're finding them, if you have accessed them, that would also be really useful. If you're finding them easy, if you're finding them helpful.
So thank you very much for all of that information you're putting in. We're basically on the Volunteering Victoria website, we have a sport volunteers specific area. There's resources from fact sheets, toolkits, even videos of clubs talking to clubs, all with the aim of giving you resources to help you take control of your volunteer program or the people you support, to give them a place that they can go to get help. We might just start moving on to the next slide, if that's okay. So our topic of recruitment is a big topic. It's probably one of the biggest areas of volunteering we look at. So I've broken it into 2 elements today. The first is planning. The second is the actual recruitment options you may consider or may have not considered. Just if flipping over, please, Jen. The first part is the planning bit. I asked the question of why focusing on this. We want to focus on this because this helps you define the volunteering support you need within a club. We are encouraging you to look differently at what you need, because it's very easy to keep doing the same old, particularly as the season gets closer and closer. And with some planning, you might find there's alternative solutions you actually haven't previously considered. And it pushes you to look beyond how we've always done things. And then once you've done that, it encourages you to set realistic position descriptions. One of the biggest challenges we face is that it's very easy to overwork our volunteers, right? And overworking them leads them to exhaustion and burnout. It also discourages others from volunteering and potentially loses you good ones. So we believe this is important. If we can just move to the next slide, please, Jen. The planning, it sounds obvious, it's easy to overlook when you're busy, but the steps we recommend, and if you go to our resources, we've created tools for you to do these things to make it easier for you. Just detail the tasks you need to be done and assign a time and length for an experienced person to do it. Set reasonable time commitments and expectations. I've put a line in there, which is expectations for more than 8 hours contribution in a day is likely unrealistic. But volunteers will put up their hands for short, doable, accessible roles. And in a community that's time poor, I think it's important at a club level to really focus in on that and understand that. I'll put my hand up. I'm a person who's done 14, 16, up to 20-hour days as a volunteer. It's not sustainable. So thinking about that in your planning is really important, as is breaking up tasks wherever possible. If you make the task smaller and accessible, it's easier for a volunteer to say yes. You might have more volunteers, but you're getting all the jobs done. You also want to align your tasks and timeframes into sort of simple, clear, understandable details, which becomes a position description. And if we go to the next page, Jen, the position description sounds formal, but you can actually make it reasonably simple. But by making it simple, you make it very accessible. So it can be simple, and that simplicity pushes people to say yes to come and be a potential volunteer for you. For game day roles like scorers or any of the number of roles you can think of, you can make it very simple, have it available on a link to a QR code around your club, and encourages people to go, okay, I see what it is you're looking for. You make these things accessible, make them usable. You can put them up in hard copy. You can place them into emails, into your social media posts or messaging, just to make it simple for you to explain what is available. It makes it easier for people to say yes. The position description might make your eyes glaze over, but we've given you samples in our resources that you literally can download, copy, paste into your own format with your own club on it. And it makes it simple to meet the requirements of a position description. If we can just flick over the page, please, Jen. I won't go through all of these in detail. They're reasonably straightforward. Our position description templates that we've created have got these in here for you, but these are the sort of things that you might want to have in your position description so people can see what you're on about, right? Particularly for your game day volunteers who are going to do simple tasks for you regularly. Your governance volunteers, you will definitely want position descriptions which are more detailed. We're probably more familiar with those. But the people who help us on game day are just gold. And how do we make them feel embraced and able to do it? We do it with planning and communicating these things. So we're going to, in a second, we're just going to start on to our recruitment options, which is the second part of this webinar. We're going to go to a Slido poll in just a second about those recruitment options, and you'll get to stop listening to me for a second. But the reason we want to focus on some recruitment options is we want to help you look differently at what your options might be. It's very easy to keep going back to do the same things we've always done, but part of the benefit of partnering with Volunteering Victoria is they help us look at solutions that we haven't previously considered. It makes us think, let's look beyond how we've always done things, right? We know there's a lot of volunteers out of there who actually want to give their time, but they don't necessarily think about sport as one of those avenues. We want to encourage people to think of sport as a way of giving their time. So attract people who want to volunteer by putting your position descriptions and availability out in different places. It just broadens options available to you, and many of those options are really, really accessible. So we're just going to head over to a poll now. I'm going to hand you over to Gillian.
So this is going to be a word cloud. So if you just pop into the Slido now, any word that comes to mind, which is your biggest issue with recruiting volunteers. So it might be, how do you find them, or how do you advertise them, or okay, availability, great, or maybe a platform that you could use. Anything that sort of kind of comes to mind in terms of why is it hard to recruit volunteers in your particular situation? Great. Commitment and time, very tricky. And that's really why when Jill was emphasizing the importance of breaking up tasks. So if somebody feels they just have to come down to the club for an hour just to help with something small, you're more likely to get them than if you ask them to stay all day. There might be some that are happy to stay all day.
These are great, folks, and
Excellent.
Yeah. With everything that we've been seeing and the way that we are trying to break up this resources and information to help you, are feeling is like according, and hopefully addresses many of these things that you're putting into your word cloud there. Belief that there's too much work. Yeah, I think we all get it. Yeah, that sort of rings true for us, doesn't it? The range of words that we've got in here, very, very familiar.
And the idea with this is that we will take away all of these words and just re-look at our resources and just make sure that that information is available to you so that it covers off a lot of these challenges. It's one person typing. Once that person's finished, we'll move on.
Yeah. Thank you for all of this.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. This is great information. And hopefully some of the planning information that I've given to you helps you. I do know what it's like when you're so busy and the season's coming up, you don't feel like you have time for it. But those planning things will likely really pay dividends for you, particularly trying to break tasks into smaller ones that are doable and accessible. And then as you go through all of the resources that we've created for you, it's then how you make that information accessible to people so they stand there and go, yeah, you know what, I could do that little bit, but not more. Okay. So let's get on. I wanted to spend a bit more time on the recruitment options because I know this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of looking for things that we can do differently. I'm going to talk through several different recruitment options here that they're broken up into different sections. I've started our discussion off with targeted recruitment because I reckon pretty well all of you here are already likely doing this really well, right? This is likely the place that you keep coming back to. We've put some suggestions here that you may not have considered. I'll briefly go through them for you because it might open up your ideas a bit, but this is only the first of a range of recruitment options that you might wish to consider. Word of mouth, obviously, through your current volunteers. If you're giving your current volunteers a great experience, they're more likely to hand out the word of mouth. So doing this stuff well does matter when you're trying to advertise informally through people. Social media options are really powerful. The local Facebook community pages for communities are an excellent source of opportunity to encourage people to know about you. Letterbox drops obviously cost money, but depending on your area, it might be something you want to consider. Advertisements in local business and op shops, I wouldn't discount them as opportunities. And the other one is your existing volunteers are fantastic for suggestions and connection. And If you look at some of the videos that we put on our resources page, that is actually a strong suggestion that came out of one of the 3 clubs that have put information there for you to share with you. The community connections we maybe some are good at and maybe not so good at others. Obviously, service clubs and associations, there are fantastic people there who would happy to put their time into something. They often don't look at sport, they'll look at other things. Why not make that something they can know about and add into their list of things? Indigenous and multicultural associations, local universities and TAFEs, students may really be happy to spend some time with you with a clearly defined role. Schools, if it is appropriate, again, students may wish to give you time. Things like neighbourhood houses, your local council and council libraries, those things can be gold. We might not think about them when we're busy. So we wanted to let you know to think about those things. Moving to our next page though, walk-in volunteers. Planning how you communicate with people who come to you randomly on game days at events is really important. We know what we're doing when we're there, but for someone who's just walked up, it can be very intimidating. So let's take the intimidation down thing, even if it's not intended. Have brief documents like your simple position description, have a QR code which links to your web page, which has that stuff, and have it up and available and ready to give to something. Sometimes a 5-minute conversation and a small amount of information is all that you need on those days. So I would encourage you to look at those solutions and make those things available for you. Sounds really simple. We're often not good at it at all. And that one can really pay dividends because they're seeing you live. Why not say, come on board, we'd really like to have you with us. Thanks, Jen. We're going to spend a little bit of time now in relation to online recruitment. The online recruitment piece is often newer for us, particularly in sporting clubs, less so in associations, but we often don't think about it as being a resource that we can use. Through partnering with Volunteering Victoria, we are aware that there, as I said before, there is this large group of people who want to volunteer, but they don't think of sport. The kids have grown up, they don't think of us. Well, why not? They are a fantastic resource of people. One of the ways we can get to them is through using online platforms. Go Volunteer, which links to Seek Volunteer, Sports People. Those 3 are probably the big ones, and we are going to go through them with you shortly with Gillian from Volunteering Victoria. There are also other ones. Their links are available here and on the Volunteering Victoria website as well. But we really encourage you to start looking at these as resources that you can use to open up your club further to a community of volunteers that we may not have tapped yet. So if we're just popping on to our next poll, I'll hand over to you, Gillian.
Yeah, so as the state peak, one of our roles is to try and connect volunteers, but then also volunteer involving organizations, sports clubs, community organizations with volunteers. So linking the 2 together. Now, there are a lot of platforms out there. The one that we often suggest is what's called Go Volunteer. And that is because it links through to Seek. Go Volunteer on our website, and I think that Melissa's going to pop into the chat the link to the page on our website, which lists a whole range of different platforms you could consider using, is something called Victor Light, and it's actually run out of Western Australia. So the state peak volunteering body in Western Australia received some funding many years ago and set it up. It is a national platform. So it works right across Australia, which is pretty useful. And as I say, it does appear on Seek. You can also use Seek directly, provided you're a community organisation, it costs you nothing. If you're a corporate, then Seek obviously does charge, even if it's for your volunteers. And that is one of the things you need to look at, is that in this space, there are a lot of little platforms that have popped up, and some of them do charge now for putting up an ad. but Go Volunteer and Seek Volunteer, you can do that for nothing. And also then, obviously sports people is in the whole sport environment. And so that might be one you're aware of. But there's clearly an option, and that's really useful because it's in the sports sector. But don't forget that volunteering, we deal with so many diverse organizations. And so it's quite useful to know what other sectors are doing, because a lot of them are also struggling to find volunteers. You can benefit from hearing from others as to how they are dealing with their recruitment. The other option and you'll find this on our website as well, is that there are local place-based organizations that support organizations and can also help with linking volunteers to organizations. So you may be fortunate enough to have a volunteer resource center in your area. If you're in the West, there's Volunteer West, for example. A lot of local councils might do this too, so they are worth chatting to just to see whether they have any matching options. But there are in terms of platforms, there are a number of very useful platforms, and there's some interesting things that are popping up at the moment, new platforms that are coming up. So it's worth keeping an eye on that page, which will take you through to all the different options.
So Gillian, if I'm a sports club, like, the people who are on our webinar today, if I wanted to start in an online sense, where would you recommend we probably start our journey with online platforms?
Look, obviously sports people, if you know how to use it and you're in that space, we usually suggest Go Volunteer and Seek, just because it's a platform we've used for a very long time. It's very easy just to register as a club. And you can often go to your volunteer resource center or your council to help you with your adverts if you're looking to see how to craft them. But you can also search very easily on it. You can see how other organizations are describing roles. So if you pop sport into Go Volunteer, it will pop up with all sorts of roles. You can put in your area, your district. So if people are looking for roles on Go Volunteer, they can find you more easily. So it's a really good option, but it's worth, even if you get one of your tech savvy volunteers, they could go through the different options and have a look and to see, because there may be others that work for you. And you may want more than just Go Volunteer, which is simply a recruitment option. You may want a combination of a recruitment and management. And there are a lot of platforms that do that. So Be Collective and Better Impact. Once you've recruited them, it'll help you manage them too. So you'll see on our website, it'll tell you whether it's a recruitment and management or just recruitment.
Thanks, Gillian. I think looking at our poll, unsurprisingly, we're doing the things that we do well. And what we're hoping with our webinar today is encourage you to think there's options where I can look differently, and that may make it a bit easier. So thanks, Gillian, for sharing those things with you. We encourage you to go and try and embrace them and see if they can work for you, and just create a different environment for you to recruit your volunteers. As we're coming to the end of the conversation that we're having, here's some tips to consider. Be flexible. If someone says to you, I would, but, try remodeling a role for them. That might secure you a person who will be with you for a long time. I talk about this quite a bit, is if you can, try having either a game day volunteer or a volunteer coordinator of some sort. If you can, that is just a place of knowledge which it allows you to support your volunteer program, but also make sure there's a spotlight on it, and it helps you plan better. Detail the why for people who are coming there. They're time poor, they have the issues that we've seen in our polls. Give them a why, and then also have volunteer mentors to help them when they come along, so that they feel embraced and feel part of it. And they think, you know what, I'm happy to come back next week when all is busy. That simple instructions with simple descriptions and photos that you can hand out at short notice. Once you've set that up, it's available to you to hand out either through QR code or physically handing out. that can be a powerful way of saying to someone who walks up on a day, how about it? You know, we'll make you feel welcome quite quickly. Brainstorm the jobs you need through a season and try to break those down. It is so easy to keep doing the same thing that we've always done. And I'm absolutely guilty of having done that in my life as a sports volunteer, totally guilty of doing that. But there might be different options and ways of looking at that you haven't thought about, and it can open up different people to become part of your club. And for existing volunteer roles, create a task list and work out whether the role can be reduced in size or can be shared with others. And talk to people about that and say, what do you think? And those things take time, I know, but it opens you up to quite a different world of how your volunteering program may be looking. Thank you, Jen. Just a couple of reminders. It's not just, so recruitment is not just about attracting enough volunteers to your club. You actually need the right people, but you need them to stay. And with planning, as well as trying out new options and ideas, recruiting great volunteers to join you, we hope becomes easier and becomes more productive, and we hope really helps you to thrive, which is what we want. So when we finish this and send out the resources to you, you'll also see the link in the chat. We encourage you to go to the Sport Volunteer page or look up Sport Volunteers in Google to go to the Volunteering Victoria specific website for this. Gillian Garner has just put it into the chat, so you can go there. Whilst today I've just talked to you about one of the 6 elements that we see in the action cycle, there's information about all the other elements as well that you can go to. There are fact sheets, there are toolkit items, there are videos of clubs talking to your club as well. And the goal is to make it attractive to not just recruit volunteers, but in the steps that you take, make people feel welcome and want to be part of your club. And that's what we want, is to have an environment where people are feeling good and wanting to come back into each of our environments. That's what I have to say today. In a moment, we'll open it up to your questions, but a participant survey, we'd really love you to participate in our short survey. The QR code and link is up there, and we take your feedback very seriously and then help us to create the next lot of webinars that we will have going ahead. Whilst this is the second webinar that we've done for this year, our hope is to do a couple of webinars a year, every year, and have a community of you available who are prepared to listen, but also prepared to potentially share your resources and ideas. Whilst we've started up a toolkit on the sports volunteers element, we would love you to contribute things that you found to be good tools into that toolkit as well, so that others can share in what you've already done. We think that sharing of information can be very powerful to help others around the state. That's all I have to say. You're probably sick of listening to my voice. At any point, has anyone got any questions that they would like to ask of us? Paul.
Great, no, thank you for that. I've been in the role of President of Hockey in Southwest Victoria for about 18 months.
Yep.
And I'm particularly interested to get feedback from people and yourselves on what drives people to volunteer and what are they seeking in return. We had that kind of discussion about, what motivates people, and would it be, is it as simple as recognizing them in a newsletter or social media, or is it maybe free coffee, at the end of the day for their work? But what seems to have worked? Because obviously we don't want to maybe pay people for different tasks, but what's worked for other people, and what do people even learn and be surprised about that drives people who are just happy to help?
Paul, that is a fantastic question. And before I hand over to Gillian Garner, if you go onto the Sport Volunteers website, there are a couple of videos there. The number one thing that existing sport clubs give as a tip to other sport clubs: recognition. Recognition in a range of forms, saying thank you. and recognising in a number of ways. If someone's prepared to put up their time, actually, apart from making them feeling well, it's the recognition piece. Gillian Garner, perhaps you might have some thoughts before on that one.
Paul, yeah, the most difficult part with volunteers is that everybody volunteers for different reasons. So part of it is actually connecting with your volunteers and finding out why they are interested in doing it. And then I guess being part of their journey too. So if, in terms of recognition, the recognition you give to a younger volunteer may be very different to one that you would give to an older volunteer. Some volunteers don't want recognition. So it's worth just finding that out from them, because there is such a range. That's why managing and coordinating your volunteers is difficult. It's not an easy job, because they're doing it because they want to be there. So you need to sort of find out why they want to be there, and then work out what will make them stay. And the more involved you with them, the more connected you are with them, the more likely they are to stay. Be happy for others to also just add. I mean, Emma, you've got your hand up, I think, whether it's a question, but because you're from an environment where you deal with other organizations and volunteers, you might have a comment on that.
Hi, Gillian. First of all, this is a fantastic webinar. Thanks for organizing. Yeah, I guess that's a really good point. I always tell the volunteer managers and coordinators to talk to your volunteers, recognize their day, establish a relationship. I think once you establish a good relationship with your volunteers, they establish a connection with you, and they establish a connection with the club. So there is a purpose for their volunteering. So I'm big about talking to people. Sometimes, you know, just sitting down and having a cup of tea, or asking your volunteers about how their day has been is already good enough for them to say, I feel counted, I feel seen, and I feel recognized. So recognition, I believe, is a very important part of it. But also, as Gillian said, recognizing why people are there as well. So I think that's good as well. I just wanted to ask a quick question to Gillian Manson from Vicsport. I support a lot of the sports clubs in the north, in the city of Whittlesea, and I have supported some of the clubs with training around advertising through to Seek Volunteer and Go Volunteer. However, what I find is, again, time is a big issue, to find a time during the day to help somebody get trained, or to give them tips around writing a position description or how to recruit better. I was just wondering, with this training is amazing. Is this sort of training, could this be done on a local base as well? So let's say if we've got a number of clubs in Whittlesea through the council that are available in the evening or on the weekend, is that something we could organise?
That's an excellent question, Emma. Thank you very much. The short answer is we'd have to think about how we do that. I think what our starting point is by creating the Sport Volunteer website with the resources that break it down into chunks with fact sheets, toolkits, and also the videos that we've placed on there. We're hoping at the very least that's a starting point for clubs to be able to do that. I think we're at the start of our journey of trying to encourage clubs to change. And as we continue on that journey in the coming years, I'm sure that will be a question about how can we actually get that information out further. I'm not sure that I have the definitive answer at this point, but I think by us collaborating and asking these questions and seeing what the appetite is to do it, that we get options to be able to do that. The big thing we encourage you to do is, all of the resources on the website are absolutely free, but being a member of Volunteering Victoria, make sure you're a part of the sport industry grouping that we've created with Volunteering Victoria. We'd like to see that grow. And so I'd look at continuing that membership and encouraging clubs to be members if possible, that the amount they have to pay is actually quite small because it's based on membership. That allows us to create that, if you like, a supportive group within industry, and we can start looking at those options, Emma. So I think watch this space. But let's
Fantastic.
start where we start and let's see where we can build to over time.
So I've sent the resources through and I've had very good feedback. Just wanted to let you know
fantastic.
that we're having really good feedback from the local
Great.
sports clubs.
Great, thank
Great.
you.
Great to know. And Jill, if I could just add, so absolutely, in terms of training, there is a lot of free training available through Volunteering Victoria at the moment. There's funding that's come through federal government. So have a look at our website. If you have a team of volunteer coordinators or volunteer leaders who you think would benefit from that, absolutely access that. The other thing that we are doing more of is that as a member of Volunteering Victoria, we can provide specialized training. So we have this amazing trainer who has been helping I think some of the councils have used the resources, and she has used those resources as well as the other information that we have through Volunteering Victoria that is helpful. So just be aware of those options. But there's a lot of free training that is available on our website, which will take you through how to do this.
Thank you.
This is an example too of how the volunteer resource centres, who are very place-based, so like Whittlesea, they are looking after clubs in those areas. Talk to those organisations that are in your area if you can, because they can help you a lot with how to frame your adverts. They can maybe link you up with other clubs so that you can share ideas.
Does that help, Emma? Beautiful. Have we got any other questions there? All right, I'm just very aware of everyone's time. It's lunchtime on a busy day. I know you've all got a lot on. If we haven't got any more questions, there's been some fantastic information that's put in the chat. This is recorded and will be available, and we will be sending out all of these resources at the end of it. The additional thing is, please love your feedback, and also thank you for your participation in the polls. We use all of this to set up the things that we do next. We just want this to be valuable for you. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. I hope this has been useful. Thank you for all the team at Volunteering Victoria and Vicsport who've made this happen. And if we're all good, I might let you head off to your busy day and we'll finish off our webinar now. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.